I don't remember seeing such a catastrophic scheme put into place ever, at least in the conflict, the parts of the conflict that I have covered here for decades.
Now, at least 32 Palestinians seeking food have been killed by Israeli gunfire near two aid distribution points close to Khan Yunis and Rafah in southern Gaza. That's according to the territory's Hamas-run health ministry. It says that dozens were also injured near the two sites run by the controversial US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The foundation said that there were no incidences at or near their sites. Now, the UN said earlier this week that nearly 900 people had been killed while trying to access aid in the 6 weeks since this foundation took over the responsibility of distributing aid from the UN. Let's now speak with Noga Tarnopolsky, who is a journalist in Jerusalem. Noga, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aisha.
Just outline for us what's happened here.
Well, what's happened today is what's been happening basically daily, almost since this scheme was founded. It appears to be an Israeli planned and conceived and created front, a notion that appealed to Prime Minister Netanyahu's cabinet for how aid could be distributed, and it's staffed in large part by American former military personnel. So this entire notion of creating food hubs where people would crowd around one single spot to get food, instead of the usual model, which is to distribute aid where people live. Speaking on general terms, this was panned ahead of time. All of the experts, all of the professionals in the field did warn Israel that this could never work, that it was a disaster waiting to happen. And that's what it's turned out to be. It's basically become, a shooting gallery where people gather, thousands of them, on the verge of famine. They have very little options for how else to get food. There is looted food in Gaza that is sold at tremendous prices in the markets, or there's the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and there's very little else, but it's not working. And I just do want to add that about 3 weeks ago, the Israeli army acknowledged that this was not working, and said they would change the routes available for people coming into these so-called humanitarian hubs. To my knowledge, though, after the announcement was made, the Israeli army hasn't changed a single thing in the functioning or in the security around these hubs.
And look, just remind us of what, because it does feel like people who are queuing for aid are getting killed very frequently. What do the Israelis say is happening here?
Well, astonishingly enough, Aisha, the Israelis basically are saying nothing. Every single day you have an incident of this type, and every single day the Israeli army, that has become more and more opaque, says we're reviewing the incident.
Last week they said there was a technical issue. There was something that happened. They said it was a technical issue.
Well, if so, that technical issue has not subsequently been clarified. But the normal line that we receive every single day from the Israeli army is we're reviewing the issue, but I have never seen a subsequent report on any of these incidents. And at this point, they would really be piling up, where I think we're significantly beyond 40 such incidents. So we're awaiting numerous military reports about what goes wrong every single day. The Israeli cabinet wanted to make a point by rejecting the UN distribution method. And it has to be said that the UN, that has basically been in charge of humanitarian aid in Gaza for decades, was also an imperfect system.
Was this UNRWA?
It was principally UNRWA. It was also the UN food program. And it was imperfect in the respect that, as Israel does say, Israel's now calling these agencies terrorist groups, which is, just a political nonsense. But the United Nations as a whole did make very significant accommodations to Hamas and accepted that Hamas, which is a terror group that took over the Gaza Strip in a very violent coup d'etat in 2007, they accepted working with them as legitimate the legitimate governing agency there, the legitimate governance. And so Israel criticizes the UN severely for that, and it is criticizable. On the other hand, the UN was able to get food to people without them getting killed. And so in weighing the options now, which are to bring back some kind of UN system, which appears to be, by the way, what Hamas is demanding in the negotiations. We don't have the details of negotiations over possible ceasefire in Gaza, but we do know that one of the sticking points, one major Hamas demand, has been to get rid of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and reinstate some other system of the distribution of aid to the population.
And I mean, it's. Do you think there's any way that Israel will change its mind? Do you think this humanitarian foundation will change? Is this the end for it, or do you think they'll carry on with it, even though it's something which is clearly not working terribly well and lots of people are getting killed?
Well, I assume you're asking me, in the event of a ceasefire, would this humanitarian effort continue? I doubt it. I mean, if you're asking me genuinely, I don't remember seeing such a catastrophic scheme put into place ever, at least in the conflict, the parts of the conflict that I have covered here for decades. I don't remember ever seeing such an ill-conceived, catastrophic outfit put into place. And, you know, the Israeli government decided on this model for purely political reasons. Netanyahu, his government, demonized the United Nations. Many say the Nations deserved it. They have a point. But by demonizing the UN and getting rid of the UN and refusing, as the Israeli government has, to allow any other Palestinian or pan-Arab governing structure to take over from Hamas, Israel has left itself as the only occupying power right now in Gaza. And this scheme was invented, either it was misconceived by people in the Israeli government and the Israeli army who have no idea how humanitarian aid needs to be distributed, or as some more and more in Israel are suggesting, this is part of a much broader plan to make life in Gaza so unlivable that Gazans will, and I'm quoting now from Netanyahu and his ministers, that Gazans will want to voluntarily migrate. This is being called a plan for ethnic cleansing, by many in the international community. I can't gauge that, but I think it certainly falls under the category of a war crime if this is the case, keeping an entire population on the verge of famine so as to not give them any other options than to desire to leave, trying to force them into narrower and narrower areas while explicitly saying, as the Israeli defense minister has, that the hope is that from these concentrated areas, they will then be able to leave. And then dispatching the head of the Mossad, the spy agency, last week to Washington. We just found out through a harrowing revelation in Axios that the reason for David Barnea's trip to Washington was to try and gain American support to persuade third nations like Libya and Indonesia to accept Gazan escapees, refugees, migrants, whatever you want to call them. And so there is an image that is coming together of the Israeli government possibly not having made a big misstep with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as initially it appeared, but maybe trying to enact a plan,
right,
which Netanyahu needs to keep his most extremist ministers on side.
That's very, very interesting. Well, Naga, I just want to also ask one other question to you. The Syrian presidency's just announced an immediate ceasefire in the southern city of Saweda. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, Al-Sueda is a province in southwest Syria, and it's renowned for its Druze population. It's sort of a Druze area. This is, I think, the fourth announcement of a ceasefire in this area. All the three previous versions failed completely. This one seems to have somewhat better chances. Again, it was announced unilaterally by the Syrian government. One of the Druze groups involved in the fighting against ISIS-linked Islamist militias in that area, the sheikh who's in charge of the most, I would say, extreme Druze faction, Hikmat al-Hijabi, he has said he does not feel beholden to this agreement. But everyone else, for now, just a few hours, seems to be holding tight. So this may have better chances, but I think we're not out of the woods yet.
OK, well, look, Noga, as ever, really, really good to catch up with you. Thank you very much for your time. That's Noga Tarnopolsky, who is a journalist in Jerusalem.